is freezing cold. Let's listen to some Steve Quayle, huh? How about that? While I eat food. It was cold. Freaking got the curtain closed too, just so I can keep the heat in here. And then I got the other heater going on in the other side of the spaceship. It's cold. It's cold.
Really hard to understand it, but look, God's going to give us a revelation unfolding. It's like Corey Ten Boom's story that her dad told her. God gives you, when you're ready to get on the train, the loving Father gives you the ticket at the time you get on the train. And I know some of the stuff, like I'm getting emails, how do we kill? But fortunately, the Hollywood producer that I was referring to, he just sent me an email, and I don't want to share his name without it, but let's just say this, Mission Impossible 2, Mission Impossible 3,
it's cold.
Very, very, very well-placed Hollywood insider. And I want to read this, Tom, because this will maybe illustrate in real time while we are on the air, why it's so important. WW's get me. Dear Steve, you are correct. I'm listening to you guys on Hagman tonight. You guys are doing an awesome job revealing the dark underbelly of Washington and Hollywood. Since the election, listen to this, the actors who are practicing Satan worship have barely been able to prevent the demons who possess them from manifesting in public. They are so freaked out by Trump's election. In all the years of my deliverance ministry in Hollywood, I can never remember a more dangerous time. Now, here's what he goes on to say. By the way, ladies, this is the real McCoy. God bless you, Arthur. Please be careful approaching. I'm sorry, no, he says, fortunately, the prayers of the righteous people protected Trump. And the Lord, now this is important. The Lord gave us the leader we needed for this time, and not the one we as a sinful nation deserved. And there seems to be a common thread, Tom and Doug, of the people, including us, who know that, if you will, God's prophetic timetable is absolutely full speed ahead. But he, because he's the creator, can say, I'm going to give these guys a timeout to get their act together, because there are none of us that are ready to deal with this stuff. It cannot be dealt with in a normal human mind context. It cannot be battled against in a normal human battle context. And, I get emails like, well, I'm just going to rebuke them in the name of Jesus. Well, show me where you're taking on the lion and the bear and winning before you go taking on Goliath. I've never seen so much assumptive faith instead of faith that produces results. So, Tom, just as we're on the air tonight, he said and this is what I call out-picturing. I want to share something. Those of you who are under the blood of the Lamb and have given your hearts to Jesus, this will not apply to you. Those of you who are playing games with God and have the tattoos of nightmares, of demons, devils, Satan, all of the strange things, get saved, get your life filled with the Holy Ghost, because just as Doug, I gave a release. I'm going to give it right over to Tom. I said something really powerful. I hope people understand it. I'm not the one that made that up. Imagine when your big screen TV becomes an active portal, and all the stuff that fills the airways, whether it's demonic. And look, I'm making DVDs and movies and stuff, but what I'm talking about is knowing the spirit behind something. And when the spirits that are being invoked by the people through ritual magic and through abandonment to Satanism, imagine when their tattoos become alive and those things burst out of their chests or off of their spine or out of their necks. And imagine when the very screen that you just bought, a 70-inch TV, or doesn't matter, a 7-foot or whatever, and imagine that there comes a time when literally that will be a true portal. And again, I've never said that, and I find, Tom, that there's certain things of revelation that God only releases to me when we're on the air. For instance, you were the one that released on the air one time one of the very first shows we ever did, and the gates of hell will not prevail. Up until that point, I had zero understanding. Now, we're talking, 10, 15 years ago, but I think it's really critical to understand that people, we pray for these presentations. The people around us are praying. The intercessors are interceding. Arthur says, I continue to pray warfare protection prayers for you and the other watchmen and women daily. Then one of my other listeners, and you've met him, I won't tell you his name, but you've met him, Tom. You and I both met him. He said this: guys, by far the best, most informative, most current and up-to-date show I've ever heard. Tells me everything that my wife and I have been reading and watching this past 2 weeks has not been for naught. Things are escalating. Things are escalating exponentially. It's a shame hardly anyone sees what is coming. Well, we know from the scripture God uses the foolish things to confound the wise. But also look at this: God used somebody, in my opinion, that had no ties to the corrupt political /Satanism. And I'll say this: on my position on this, and I will only speak for myself, Tom, is that the entire political elite is given over to perversion, with few exceptions. Okay, I can even tell you some of the guys, and I won't name names, and it won't do me any good to throw out what I've been told, and I won't slander anybody, but I'll tell you this: that the idea of where we're at in time with the CERN and the glass panels, one of the languages they are communicating with? They're communicating with Proto-Hebrew. According to, a lot of research, the tribe of Eber, E-B-E-R, were the only ones that didn't participate, and, in the building of, the Tower of Babylon, and therefore God allowed them to maintain their pure language while everything else was a spin-off, a take-off, a distortion. But I find it fascinating that they're holding up panels in the target beam, actually the holder in front of their focus point, if you will, of Proto-Hebrew, and they're communicating with something. Now, guess who would know that language? Now, also, I want to share something. Everybody I've talked to that's encountered the living giants, they have the ability to speak languages. You don't need to get an interpreter for a giant that's been in France or one that's been in Germany. The power of their mental faculties is so great that, there are ways, and I don't know those ways, or I'd spill my guts, but there are ways to deal with that and to protect it. By the way, it goes beyond aluminum foil. But the point is that we're now seeing the master lock. I don't know at what energy, what energy level the lock spins, everything opens up and all hell breaks loose. But I will say this: when the CERN ceremony took place in Gotthard, however they pronounce it, it was obvious that it was a celebration of Lucifer's release unto the earth to bring the illumination and the ultimate persuasion and the ultimate expression of total rebellion against God, hatred and contempt for humanity that will ultimately end, in the words of Jesus, if the days were short, there'd be no flesh left alive. That's, ladies and gentlemen, is how important this is. And just because a demon puts on a business suit, has glasses, and has a PhD from wherever, doesn't make him any less of a demon. And when these guys are openly talking about, the fact that they know exactly who they're trying to communicate with, and even today, weren't the parallel universe stories all over the London Daily Mail, the front of Grudge? By the way, I want everybody to go to the front of Grudge, as Tom and I are coming to the end, and look at the Egyptian grave 7,000 years old. Look at the size of the steps, and then look at the size of the skeleton, especially look at the femur and just the size of relationship. They're disproportionate. That is one big skeleton. They're claiming royalty. In order to be Egyptian royalty, you had to have the genetics of the giants, and that's what the Sumerian Table of Kings was all about. So when you said, Tom, it's the Egyptian priesthood, that is so, or reference to that that is so pertinent today. On the front of Drudge, they're showing a grave, and look at the size of the steps down in the grave, and you tell me if that's an ordinary size skeleton.
Egyptian grave discovered 7,000 years old.
The Legend of Horus and Behutet and the Winged Disc. In the 363rd year of Ra-Heru-Khuti, who liveth for ever and ever, his majesty was in Taw-Kens, and his soldiers were with him. The enemy did not conspire against their lord, and the land is called Au-Autet unto this day. And Ra set out an expedition in his boat, and his followers were with him, and he arrived at Uthas-Heru, which lay to the west of the Nome, and to the east of the canal Pakhenu, which is called to this day. And Heru-Behutet was in the boat of Ra, and he said unto his father Ra-Heru-Khuti, i.e. Ra-Hermakis, I see the enemies are conspiring against their lord. Let thy fiery serpent gain the mastery over them. 13. Then the majesty of Ra-Harmakis said unto thy divine Ka, O Heru-Behutet, O son of Ra, thou exalted one, who didst proceed from me, overthrow thou enemies who are before thee straightway. And Heru-Behutet flew up into a horizon of the form of the great winged disc, for which reason he is called Great God, Lord of Heaven, unto this day. And when he saw the enemies in the heights of heaven, he set out to follow after them in the form of the great winged disc. And he attacked with such terrific force those who opposed him that they could neither see with their eyes nor hear with their ears, and each of them slew his fellow. In a moment of time there was not a single creature left alive. Then Heru-Behutet, shining with very many colors, came in the form of the great winged disc to the boat of Ra-Hermakis. And Thoth said unto Ra, O Lord of the gods, Behutet hath returned in the form of the great winged disc, shining with many colors. Children, for this reason he is called Heru-Behutet unto this day. And Thoth said, The city Teb shall be called the city Heru-Behutet, and thus it is called unto this day. And Ra embraced thee of Ra, and said unto Heru-Behutet, Thou didst put grapes into the water, which cometh forth from...
Hello. What just happened? What? I don't know what happened. Something just done happened. My sound just got taken away.
Invention is an act of determination to go where you couldn't before. The all-new Pilot Trail Sport, part of the Honda line of rugged vehicles.
The magic is calling you to a celebration 50 years in the world.
Thirtet, was with him, and he saw the
That's so funny that that Disney commercial was just now playing the roller coaster song. Because there was a woman getting murdered in the middle of the recording of that song. You can actually hear her screaming. Yeah, real story. They used that song to lure the children in.
is overthrown on the ground, each one of them being fettered. Then said Ra to Heru-Beutet, "There is sweet life in this place, and for the reason the abode of the palace of Heru-Beutet is called Sweet Life unto this day." And Ra said unto Thoth, "Here was the slaughter of mine enemies, and the place is..."
There was a picture that I just saw, and the person sitting on the chair is twice the size of the person standing up.
Teb unto this day. And Thoth said unto Heru-Beutet, "Thou art a great protector, Makkah, and the boat of Heru-Beutet is called Makkah unto this day." Then said Ra unto the gods who were in his following, "Behold now, let us sail our boat upon the water, for our hearts are glad, because our enemies have been overthrown on the earth." And the water where the great god sailed is called Peken-Ur unto this day. And behold, the enemies of Ra rushed into the water, and they took the forms of crocodiles and hippopotami. But nevertheless, Ra-Heru-Kuti sailed over the waters in his boat, and when the crocodiles and the hippopotami had come nigh unto him, they opened wide their jaws in order to destroy Ra-Heru-Kuti. And when Heru-Beutet arrived, and his followers who were behind him in the forms of workers in metal, each having in his hands an iron spear.
That implies that there was conflict and war between the Nephilim, the abominations, which is, it's in the Bible that they killed themselves. It says the fallen watchers watched their first born children destroy themselves. They were giants that were upwards 450 feet tall. Now, by the time this stuff is happening, the giants are much smaller. They're like 15, 17, 20 feet, 25 feet tall. There's a whole slew of different skeleton bones that are different in length. But the reason why I'm listening to this is because they're saying that they discovered a tomb in Egypt that might be 7,000 years old, and apparently this skeleton is a giant. And they thought that they were gods. So it's very natural for you to think that these people maybe even had elongated skulls. They were hybrids. Just like what we're trying to do now, creating hybrids. Neuralink. Beast, the little sellout. Beast boy. Little beast boy. Sell out for money. Says that he's going to be one of the first people to get Neuralink. Good job, man. Go for it. Do it. Go. You already sold your soul. Elon wouldn't be doing this. He would cut Neuralink off if he knew what it was about to do. He's saying AI is the most dangerous thing, and then yet he's developing Neuralink. Makes sense?
According to his name, they smote the crocodiles and the hippopotami, and there were brought in there straightway 651 crocodiles, which had been slayed before the city of Edfu. Then spake Ra-Harmachis unto Heru-Beutet, "My image shall be here in the land of the south, which is a house of victory or strength, and the house of Heru-Beutet is called Necht-Het unto this day." 14. Then the god Thoth spoke, after he had looked upon the enemies lying upon the ground, saying, "Let your hearts rejoice, O ye gods of heaven. Let your hearts rejoice, O ye gods who are in the earth. Horus, the youthful one, cometh in peace, and he hath made manifest on his journey deeds of very great might, which he hath performed according to the book of slaying the hippopotamus. And from that day, figures of Heru-Beutet in metal have existed." Then Heru-Beotep took upon himself the form of the winged disc.
Oh. That's that story. Somebody was saying that a story in the Bible, maybe it was parting the Red Sea or something, was plagiarized off of this story in the ancient Egyptian stories. This sounds nothing like that. This sounds like Nephilim battling each other, and he was fighting against his own kind. All the different abominations that were created.
Himself upon the front of the boat of...
Right.
The Hipper Clipper is a cut above. Ooh. His State Farm agent is a small business.
E, and he placed by his side the goddess Nekibet and the goddess Uechet in the form of two serpents, that they might make the enemies to quake in all their limbs when they were in the forms of crocodiles and hippopotami in every place wherein became the land of the south and the land of the north. Then those enemies rose up to make their escape from before him, and their face...
Two serpents. Americas. The land of the plumed serpent. Ancient Egyptian mythology can be found in the Grand Canyons too. All of these people right now are trying to bring back Egyptian gods. You can see it in the music. You can see it in the movies. You can see it in the politicians talking about Egyptian gods. Wake up, world.
Towards the land of the south, and their hearts were stricken down through fear of him. And Heru-Behutet was at the back, or side of them, in the boat of Ra. And there were in his hands a metal lance and a metal chain, and the metal workers who were with their lord were equipped for fighting with lances and chains. And Heru-Behutet saw them, to the southeast of the city of Uist, Thebes, some distance away. Then Ra said to Thoth, "Those enemies shall be smitten with blows that kill." And Thoth said to Ra, "That place is called the city Chet-Met unto this day." And Heru-Behutet made a great overthrow among them. And Ra said, "Stand still, O Heru-Behutet." And that place is called Het-Ra to this day. And the god who dwelleth therein is Heru-Behutet Ra-Amsu, or Min. Then those enemies rose up to make their escape from before him, and the face of the god was toward the land of the north, and their hearts were stricken through fear of him.
The god that dwells there, what's that guy's name? Idol worship. You shall have no other gods before me. Why else do you think God hardened the heart of Pharaoh? On the other side, you can say it was his free will. Guy was never, that Pharaoh was never gonna give up like that. He's too prideful and arrogant. He's a king, for God's sake. All of his magicians and sorcerers could do pretty much more or less the same things that God did on a smaller scale. Why? Because they're demons too. They were powered by demons. 고맙게 잘 보았어요. Anyways.
And Heru-Behutet was at the back, or side of them, in the boat of Ra. And those who were following him had spears of metal and chains of metal in their hands. And the god himself was equipped for battle with the weapons of the metal workers, which they had with them. And he passed a whole day before he saw them to the northeast of the nome of Dendra. Then Ra said unto Thoth, the enemies are resting, their lord. And the majesty of Ra Hermachus said to Heru-Beutet, thou art my exalted son, who didst proceed from Nut. The courage of the enemies hath failed in a moment. And Heru-Beutet made great slaughter among them. And Thoth said, the winged disc shall be called the name of this Ot, and is called Heru-Beutet. Its mistress, whose name is to the south, in the name of his god. And the acacia and the sycamore shall be the trees of the sanctuary. Then the enemies turned aside to flee from before him, and their faces were toward the north, and they went to the swamps of Ueter, i.e. the Mediterranean, and their courage failed through fear of him. And Heru-Beutet was at the back or side of them in the boat of Ra, and the metal spear was in his hands, and those who were in his following were equipped with the weapons for battle of the metal workers. And the god spent 4 days and 4 nights in the water in pursuit of them. But he did not see one of the enemies, who fled from before him in the water in the forms of crocodiles and hippopotami. At length he found them and saw them, and Ra said unto Horus and Heben, O winged disk, thou great god and lord of heaven, seize thou them. And he hurled his lance after them, and he slew them, and worked a great overthrow of them. And he brought 142 enemies to the forepart of the boat of Ra, and with them was a male hippopotamus which had been among those enemies. And he hacked them into pieces with his knife, and he gave their entrails to those who were in the following. And he gave their carcasses to the gods and goddesses who were in the boat of Ra on the river bank of the city of Heben. Then Ra said unto Thoth, see what mighty things Heru-Beutet hath performed in his deeds against the enemies. Verily he hath smitten them, and the male hippopotamus he hath opened the mouth, and he hath speared it, and he hath mounted upon its back. Then said Thoth to Ra, Horus shall be called winged disk, great god, smiter of the enemies in the town of Heben, from this day forward. And he shall be called he who standeth on the back, and prophet of this god, from this day forward. These are the things which happened in the lands of the city of Heben, in a region which measured 342 measures on the south, and on the north, on the west, and on the east. 15. Then the enemies rose up before him by the lake of the north, and their faces were set towards Uacter, which they desired to reach by sailing. But the gods smote their hearts when they turned and fled in the water, and they directed their course to the water and the nome of Martet Ament.
Death of marriage has meant the death of male roles. If men are not protectors and provider, they lose their roles. Fewer men are getting married, fewer men are fathers. This means they direct their energies elsewhere. Opioid deaths have surged among single and divorced men. While 61% of the adult population is married, only 28% of opioid deaths occur among married men. Never married and divorced adults represent 32% of the population and 71% of opioid deaths. The consequences of the sexual revolution for our society are grim. Depression and gender dysphoria are now running rampant. The fertility rate for the United States has dropped from 3.6 children in 1958 to 1.7 children today. In the 1950s, men married at 23 and women at 20. Today, it's 29 for men and 27 for women. We have become a country without a future, literally, all to fulfill a perverse lie that meaning is to be found purely in genital pleasure.
Thanks, bro. I like you, Ben. I like you,
Some
Ben.
people like to talk in the
Even though you're a
microphones.
Jew, even though you practice
And they
Judaism.
gathered themselves together in the water of Mertet in order to join themselves with the enemies who serve, Set, and who are in this region. And Heru-Beutet followed them, being equipped with all his weapons of war to fight against them. And Heru-Beutet made a journey in the boat of Ra, together with the great god, who was in his boat with those who were his followers. And he pursued them on the lake of the north twice, and passed 1 day and 1 night, sailing down the river in pursuit of them, before he perceived and overtook them. For he knew not the place where they were, Then he arrived at the city of Pur-Rehu, and the majesty of Ra said unto Heru-Beutet, What hath happened to the enemies? They have gathered together themselves in the water to the west of the Nome of Mertet, in order to unite themselves with the enemies who serve
I need to
Set,
do a beamer
and
session
who
on my
are in
kidneys.
this
My
region,
kidneys kind of hurt
at the
right
place
now.
where are our staff and scepter. And Thoth said unto Ra, Uast in the Nome of Mertet is called Ueseb, because of this unto this day,
Oh, hi,
and the
how are
lake
you?
which is in called Tempt.
My name's Daniel.
Then
Nice to meet you.
Heru-Beutet spake in the presence of his father Ra, saying, I beseech thee to set thy boat against them, so that I may be able to perform against them that which Ra willeth. And this was done, and he made an attack upon them with the lake which was at the west of his district, and he perceived them on the bank of the sea.
Hello, I just wanted to say thank you for stopping by. I'm autistic and I'm a Christian, and all my content is about revealing my story, my real life story. It's all on my YouTube channel if you want to go check it out. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. I'm just listening to this if you want to keep listening with me.
Which belongeth to the lake of Mertet. Then Heru-Beutet made an expedition against them, and his followers were with him, and they were provided with weapons of all kinds for battle. And he wrought a great overthrow among them, and he brought in 381 enemies, and he slaughtered them in the forepart of the boat of Ra, and he gave one of them to each of those who were in his train. Then Set rose up and came forth, and raged loudly with words of cursing and abuse, because of the things which Heru-Beutet had done in respect of the slaughter of the enemies. And Ra said unto Thoth, This fiend Nehahabhura uttereth words at the top of his voice because of the things which Heru-Beutet hath done unto him. And Thoth said unto Ra, Cries of this kind shall be called Nehahabhura unto this day. And Heru-Beutet did battle with the enemy for a period of time, and he hurled his iron lance at him, and he threw him down on the ground in his region, which is called Pareritu unto this day. Then Heru-Beutet came and brought the enemy with him, and his spear was in his neck, and his chain was round his hands and arms, and the weapon of Horus had fallen into the mouth and had closed it. And he went with him before his father Ra, who said, O Horus, thou winged disk, twice great, Uritenten, is the deed of valor which thou hast done, and thou hast cleansed the district. And Ra said unto Thoth, The palace of Heru-Beutet shall be called Lord of the district which is cleansed, because of this, and thus it is called unto this day. And the name of the priest thereof is called Uritenten unto this day. And Ra said unto Thoth, Let the enemies in Set be given over to Isis and her son Horus, and let them work all their heart's desire upon them. And she and her son Horus set themselves in position with their spears in him at the time when there was storm, or disaster in the district. And the lake of the god was called She-en-Aha from that day to this. Then Horus, the son of Isis, cut off the head of the enemy, Set, and the heads of his friends in the presence of Father Ra and of the great company of the gods. And he dragged him by his feet through his district with a spear driven through his head and back. And Ra said unto Thoth, Let the son of Osiris drag the being of disaster through his territory. And Thoth said, It shall be called Ata. And this hath been the name of the region from that day to this. And Isis, the divine lady, spake before Ra, saying, Let the exalted winged disk become the amulet for my son Horus, who hath cut off the head of the enemy and the heads of his fiends. 16. Thus Heru-Beutet and Horus, the son of Isis, slaughtered that evil enemy and his fiends and the inert foes, and came forth with them to the water of the
Whoa. That's awesome.
Are you tired of damaging your wall when hanging your wall decorations? With Staff's picture hanging systems, this is no longer a problem. Easy and
west side of this district, and Heru Beyutet was in the form of a man of mighty strength, and he had the face of a hawk, and his head was crowned with the white crown and the red crown, and with 2 plumes and 2 uriae, and he had the back of a hawk, and his spear and his chain were in his hands. And Horus, the son of Isis, transformed himself into a similar shape, even as Heru Beyutet had done before him.
Transformed.
And they slew the enemies altogether.
These guys can shapeshift. The angels, the fallen watchers, they could shapeshift. They took on the form of human men to seduce the daughters of men, and had sex with them and bore children. That's in Genesis chapter 6. All of these ancient Egyptian pharaohs were actually human hybrids, meaning they were not fully human. Their DNA was corrupted by angel blood. They are unredeemable. Angels don't have souls. I mean, the Nephilims, they don't have a soul. When they die, they become disembodied spirits. Those are the disembodied spirits that roam this earth today. All of these ancient gods and abominations, demons from all throughout history. Demons were born all throughout history. And now they're all trying to attack God's chosen children, keeping them from spreading the truth. I just got banned yesterday on TikTok, and I don't know why. Somebody called me retarded, and I said it out loud, and I wasn't talking about anything hateful. And then all of a sudden my live feed gets cut off. I was so flabbergasted because I didn't say anything wrong. I know I didn't say anything wrong. And the devil just keeps attacking me like this. Got banned on my other TikTok account literally the day before that. So both of my accounts are banned right now, which is why I'm on YouTube. YouTube's not nearly as fun. No one ever even watches. TikTok, people just they just come and go, and people interact with you. It's fun. People hop on the box with you and have chats with you. YouTube is, anyways.
Est Emperor Rehu, on the edge of the stream, and this god hath sailed over the water wherein the enemies had banded themselves to either against him from that day to this. Now these things took place on the 7th day of the first month of the season Pert. And Thoth said, This region shall be called At Shatet, and this hath been the name of the region from that day unto this. And the lake which is close by it hath been called Tempt, from that day to this. And the 7th day of the first month of the season Pert hath been called the festival of sailing from that day to this. Then Set took upon himself the form of a hissing serpent, and he entered into the earth in this district without being seen. And Ra said, Set hath taken upon himself the form of a hissing serpent. Let Horus, the son of Isis, in the form of a hawk-headed staff, set himself over the place where he is, so that the serpent may never more appear. And Thoth said, Let this district be called Hem-Hemet by name. And thus hath it been called that from that day to this. And Horus, the son of Isis, in the form of a hawk-headed staff, took up his abode there with his mother Isis. In this manner did these things happen. Then the boat of Ra arrived at the town of Het-Aha. Its forepart was made of palm wood, and the hind part was made of acacia wood. Thus the palm tree and the acacia tree have been sacred trees from that day to this. Then Heru-Behutet embarked in the boat of Ra, and after he made the end of fighting, and sailed, and Ra said unto Thoth, Let this boat be called. And thus hath it been called from that day to this. And these things hath been done in commemoration in this place from that day to this. And Ra said unto Heru-Behutet, Behold the fighting of the Smite friend, and his twofold strength, and the Smy friend Set, are upon the water of the north, and they will sail downstream upon. And Heru-Behutet said, Whatsoever thou commandest shall take place. O Ra, Lord of the gods, grant thou, however, that this thy boat may pursue them into every place whithersoever they shall go, and I will do them whatsoever pleaseth Ra. And everything was done according to what he had said. Then this boat of Ra was brought by the winged sun disk in the waters of the lake of Meh. And Heru-Behutet took in his hands his weapons, his darts, and his harpoon, and all the chains which he required for the fight. And Heru-Behutet looked and saw one only of these Sabu, friends there on the spot, and he was by himself. And he threw one metal dart, and bought, or dragged them along straight away, and he slaughtered them in the presence of Ra. And he made an end of them, and there were no more of the fiends of Set in this place at that moment. 17. And Thoth said, This place shall be called Atst-Ab-Heru, because Heru-Behutet wrought his desire upon them, i.e. the enemy. And he passed 6 days and 6 nights coming into port on the waters thereof, and did not see one of them. And he saw them fall down in the watery depths, and he made ready the place of Ast-Ab-Heru there.
I just had a thought. I just saw Joy running on the other side of the fence. I told my parents not to do the electric fence, and they spent $1,700. They did this fence without my knowledge, and they only did a 4-foot fence. I would have told them to do a little bit higher than this. So I gotta find out how to. Easiest way to make a short fence higher.
As a chef, I've spent my life in kitchens. For me, the finest restaurant of them all is the one I get to come home to. Bosch, invented for life.
For you that already have some fencing put up and you realize that it's just not tall enough, well, I got a great way to extend it. A little cheap way. It's go get some 1.5 inch PVC pipe, cut it to just a little over 3 foot, and The 1.5 inch will slide over the top. You may have to bend it a little bit to get it started, then use like a rubber mallet and you can bang it on down. But as you can see here, I've used it inside my, this is my chicken run area.
No.
Hey, stunning fam.
If you are thinking of buying fencing supplies from Menards, Lowe's, or Home Depot, you should definitely watch this video to the end. It could save you a lot of money, and it could help you get a fence that is much more durable and thick. If this is your first time on the Life Guide channel, please hit that subscribe button. I do lots of home improvement DIY videos. So about a year ago, I built this fence around my backyard at our house. And it cost me, all in all, I think it was about $3,000. And that surprised me because, you know, you look at stores, like I bought my fencing supplies at Menards, and I like Menards and they have good prices usually, but the fencing posts and things costed so much. Like the fence mesh, I brought the black vinyl mesh. It was, 50 foot long and 4 feet tall. And that only costed me like, I can't remember if it was, $100 or maybe it was a little bit less than that. And so I'm like, oh, it's not gonna be that bad. I've already got, 150 feet of fencing mesh. Like how much more can it cost for posts and rails? And boy, was I wrong. So where fencing companies get you is in the top rails and the line posts and the hardware. It costs so much more than you would think it would. I mean, I thought, okay, if the fence mesh costs, $300, then the top rails and posts are probably gonna cost about the same. But I was so wrong. Like I spent, maybe $250, $300 on the fence mesh, but then I spent nearly $3,000 on all of the accompanying hardware. This year, I installed a new fence, a very simple fence. There's 2 terminal posts, 10 line posts, each spaced about 9 feet apart, and about 100 feet of fencing, and then all the accompanying hardware. And I got thicker. Here's the kicker. I got the fence posts and top rail were all thicker and heavier duty, and I got them for cheaper by looking outside of Menards, outside of Lowe's, outside of Home Depot. And so I'm going to share with you how I did it, and then hopefully you can do something likewise and save yourself a lot of money. And ultimately, we're talking like schedule 20 pipe, schedule 40 pipe, like you could get ridiculously thick pipe. So if you want to have a ridiculously strong kind of fence and you want to save money, I would recommend looking outside of the big box stores. I would recommend calling around to different steel manufacturing plants nearby and asking if they know anyone who is a supplier of chain link fencing. And if you can find a farm supply company, that'd be a great place to start looking. I wish I knew this was an option back a year ago when I spent nearly $3,000 to build a fence that looks nice. Sure, it looks great, but it's kind of flimsy. The posts are just, I feel like I could bend them with my hands if I had to. And I just, it's so liberating knowing that I can construct and build a fence, 100 feet of fencing for under $600 that is a lot sturdier than the more expensive fencing that I used to get. Another cool thing about going with the farm supply company that I went with was that I could order thicker gauge chain link for dirt cheap. Like we could get twice as heavy of steel for only about $1 more per foot. So if I wanted to have the 100 feet of fencing be 9 gauge instead of 11 gauge wire, and 9 gauge is like, practically indestructible. It's like commercial grade, right? that would only cost me about $100 extra. Now, if I go to Menards, if you go to Menards, you can see to get 6-foot 9-gauge wire, just 50 feet of that costs about $300 just for the mesh. There's just a lot of reasons why it would be well worth just taking, you know, a half hour and making a few phone calls to any steel manufacturers, producers, suppliers that are near you and asking for referrals. If you do that enough times,